Today's video is for you if you struggle with forgiving someone. Maybe that person is not sorry, or maybe they are sorry and you just struggle with forgiveness. And so at the end of this video will be our family's weekly vlog, but most of this video is going to be about forgiveness. So I like to talk about forgiveness because it was a big part of how I was able to get through shaken baby syndrome by forgiving the person who shook my daughter. And I went through all of that with God. I went through anger. I went through resentment towards that person. I went through a lot of things, and I still have to go through, anger towards that person and forgive again. And so forgiveness has always been very important to me. And that's why I share about forgiveness, because I know that it will be important for you in moving on from whatever you're going through. So the Bible talks about forgiveness, and it says in Matthew 6:14, Jesus said, "If you forgive others their transgressions, your heavenly Father will forgive you." And then it talks about forgiving, 77 times, which is symbolic for just continuing to forgive someone. And so as Christians, if we want to, live by what we see in the Bible and read in the Bible, we know that forgiveness is a big part of that. And you may be going through something that happened. Maybe it's not as dramatic as shaken baby syndrome, but I use this even now. So it's not just forgiving someone that did something so terrible as, like basically killing my child. But through that experience, I learned how to forgive in small situations too. So maybe you're just in the position where you're like, man, I just cannot forgive this person. They are getting on my nerves. And that could be like your spouse. Like there's just something that they did and you're just really struggling with forgiveness. And so if you meditate on Bible verses like this, if you forgive others their transgressions, then your heavenly Father will forgive you. When I think about that verse, I think about how much I want the Lord to forgive me. So then I need to also extend that grace. And it's not always easy to do. But if we are putting that in the front of our minds, each time you find yourself thinking something, for example, thinking something negative about that person or thinking about what they did wrong, things like that, replay that Bible verse in your mind. And hopefully that will help you to get your focus off of unforgiving and back onto forgiveness. So here are some ways to forgive. Number one, accept that you cannot change the past. And that's a hard one, because no matter what that person did, whether they are sorry or not, it can't be changed at this point. If it would feel good, it would feel better if they would ask for forgiveness, but it's still not going to change that. If the person who shook my daughter, my ex-husband, if he asked for forgiveness even now, years later, that would feel good to get that from him, to kind of have that closure. And just to know that they know what they did was wrong. But it's not going to change anything. It's not going to bring her back. It's not going to change that she was shaken. It's not going to change all the trauma. So we have to accept that, we can't change what happened, but we can change how we react to it. So instead of dwelling on it, instead of resenting that person and living in that resentment, we can accept it and move forward. And a lot of the times, especially if they're not sorry, it's going to be more for yourself than it is for them, because you are the only one thinking of it most of the time, probably. If that person isn't sorry, they don't care, they're probably not sitting here dwelling on it like you are. It's only hurting you. So accepting that you can't change it is a step towards forgiveness. So number two, make the decision to forgive. So it is a complete decision. There is no one forcing you to forgive. There is no one there's just no reason that you have to forgive. It's a decision. And so once you make that decision, make it fully. So don't go back and forth with that person. If the person is sorry and then you kind of keep throwing it up to them in their face, whatever, that's not true forgiveness. Make the decision to forgive and move forward. And if they're not sorry, you still have to make that decision that, okay, they're not sorry, but I am deciding to forgive, so I'm going to continue to forgive that person, even if you have to keep forgiving them in your mind, because what they did keeps replaying in your mind. And so, number three, ask God for help. This is a very hard thing. Forgiveness can be extremely difficult, and it can bring out a lot of different emotions. And so be sure to ask God for his help. It seems very simple, but that's something that can be easily forgotten. Talk to God about your feelings. If you're really struggling with your own heart and your own, moving on, then ask God to help you with that. Just have a chat with him. Say, God, please change my heart. Renew my heart. Renew my mind. Purify my heart. Because it is a hard thing to do on your own. And there's no need to do it on your own because you have God there to help you. So ask him to put forgiveness on your heart, on your mind, and to remind you as many times as you need to forgive again. And you can also just pray that prayer of, the one that talks about where Jesus was on the cross and he says, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do." That may be something that you have to replay over and over in your prayers. Forgive them, Father, they know not what they do. And you just repeat that over and over and ask God for his help, because he understands fully what it's like to forgive someone who's not sorry. So number 4, focus on the present moment and what you can control. You have to be present. Forgiveness is in the present. You can't live in the past and forgive that person. You can't live in the future because you don't know what they're going to do again, potentially, that you might have to forgive again. So just live in this present moment. Focus on right now and how you can forgive. And then surrender the hurt over to Jesus, because I am sure that whatever the person has done to you has caused you hurt, or you wouldn't even be considering the fact of how hard it is to forgive the person. And so we have to stop, putting so much expectation and putting our happiness on what other people's choices are and what they do, to us. And we have to surrender that over to God. Surrender our happiness, surrender our joy, and, surrender the hurt over to God and let him carry it for us, because it's too heavy of a burden for us to carry on our shoulders all the time. And you're going to function much better if you just surrender it and let it go to him. That doesn't mean it's not going to hurt and you're not going to feel the pain, but if you actively tell the Lord, I am surrendering this to you, then it's an act of obedience on your part. And then pray for the person who hurt you. And that's the final one that I wrote down, because it's probably the most difficult one. It is very difficult to pray for someone who hurt you, but it is possible, and it's what we're called to do as Christians. So, even Jesus, like I mentioned earlier in the video, prayed for the person who was right next to him, prayed for the people who were killing him. So we can pray for those who hurt us as well. I had to get to that point. That wasn't like my first step of forgiveness was, I'm just going to pray for my ex-husband all the time after what he did. I'm just going to, feel so comfortable doing so. And I'm going to do it with a smile on my face. That is not how it felt. It felt horrible at first to try to pray for someone who, basically destroyed a big part of your life and destroyed your daughter's life. And so I had to learn over time, as you walk through these other steps, it helps you to be able, as God heals your heart, to be able to pray for the person. And that's what we're called to do. And so it's very important that we don't skip that step of praying that person, for example, when I think about my situation, I pray that my ex-husband would see the bigger picture of what happened, as far as, the shaken baby syndrome and everything that my daughter went through and that I went through, and that he would truly see me for who I am and who I continued to be through that situation because of God, and who I continue to be now. I pray that I will be an example to him. And if not me, that the entire situation would have just, wake him up to God and to what, God can do for him and all of these things. I want him to be saved. I want him to go to heaven. And that's just me as a human being who loves other human beings, because I want to be more like Jesus every day. And so by praying for this person who did something so bad makes me feel like I am being obedient to God and what he would want me to do. So that is what I have for forgiveness this week. I'll be on here, on Sundays to talk about a new topic each week. We'll talk about grace and mercy, unconditional love, different things that tie into my story about shaken baby syndrome. And things that I have learned through shaken baby syndrome. So I'm going to do this little like devotion type, you know, video every week. So I'll see you next Sunday. Yay! Look at you.
Oh, we're gonna need the honey.
Can you bring?
Help me, she got a screw. Hi. Lava, things like that. And so her stomach couldn't empty really at all. We tried to feed her by mouth when she first, you know, was like diagnosed. Oh, I'm getting a migraine. You have got to be kidding me.
Yeah, sand on it.